landen weten.
Ja.
Dus ook inderdaad als je de stad een beetje van hoe daarmee elkaar.
Ja. Ja, dat is een beetje ook inderdaad om te kijken en vergelijken en dan je eigen oordeel geven.
Dat is wel lastig, dus van hele open. Ik denk dat het smart moet. Ik denk dat het even lijkt wel moeilijk op.
Hij is even kijken, ja, ik moet even naar deze toe. Goldit, yes. Hij is inderdaad uitdagend.
Ja, dat.
Aan de andere kant, ja, binnen het bestek geef je advies, maar ik kan me voorstellen inderdaad, misschien denkt, het is misschien vandaar dat ik net met Peter over had, van hoe zit het met de toetsing. Dat je misschien denkt van, nou is dit 0,25 waard van die cijfer, maar aan de andere kant, het is wel onderdeel van het vak. Ik ga het weer zeggen, dat is natuurlijk altijd een mooie theorie en ik weet dat je als student anders naar kijkt, maar dit is het leren, dus je gaat ermee aan de slag. Dus dat is ook eigenlijk het onderdeel. Dat blijft altijd het probleem van de toets, maar dat zullen we naar het eind bereiken. Oké, welkom. I made the euro sign a bit too big, but today we're going to have a look at the private sector. Because until now, let's see how this is going to move or not. Yes. Okay. The learning objectives. In fact, it's about the whole system sector. You will see as a part how the system can work. And the private sector, we will see, will always take part in the whole system of land administration. There are three subjects for today. First is title insurance. Second is title insurance is something that's working in the US. If you have seen the paper, that's, by the way, absolutely not written by someone from geomatics perspective, but as the title already says, it is from an economic perspective. So a lot of focus how it works, but then about the economics behind it. The second subject will be blockchain, very technical. We all know about Bitcoin, but there are also discussions to use blockchain for maybe a substitute or addition to land administration. And finally, and that's also about the paper I did, it's not really split outside the scope of land administration, but it's more about all the developments taking place about data-driven city, or as also known as the smart city. The paper I included is not for the exam. It's also more about also a connection, I think, between GEO5009 and another subject. I don't know if you're going to follow it. There's ethics about ethics of the data-driven city. But there is a connection because we're talking about data, and also there the private sector is really, I would not say in charge, but maybe leading the developments. So we don't know exactly what the future will bring. Yes, title insurance. Until now, the focus, I think, and it's very traditional, we started with the guy Napoleon. It's very focused on the government. The government is in charge. The government does takes the land registry in its hands. Also the cadastre. It's mainly focused, if you see on the historical background. What did he want to do in 1811, 200 years ago? Fair taxation, you know it, and also support the real estate market by offering legal security. Now, this has also to do, of course, with economics. You want to support your economy, you want to boost it. Without legal security, no real mortgage market. Also, the prices of real estate will be lower. Then, from the point of view of the Cambodian, that would mean that you can get less taxes. If you hold to the cadastral concept, famous core is the same as Napoleon, with the exception of we added a computer, and we have title deeds, we have a cadastre. We can add that with all more information about that, of course. But I think that the big progress is the computer, but the system is still the same. And you also see in this paper from Williamson, without this modern governments cannot understand the built environment of cities, etc., etc. So also the focus on the government. So we're making it for the government. You follow also 1009, I think, both. Right? Yes. Now then you know the whole system behind it and spatial data infrastructure. So there's more than the government. There's also private data and private actors. Now to sum this up, we know them from the public sector, but now the private sector. What people can we or companies can we meet over there? Okay, you have read the material insurance, but if we go to insurance companies, we will indeed discuss. But have you ever seen a real estate transaction? No? Never went to a notary? You didn't purchase an apartment? You never went with your parents? Never heard about your parents or family members who purchased real estate? Okay, totally blank. No problem. I will explain it, but what you see and that will be everywhere in the world. I will go back to the Dutch system because I'm the most familiar with the system. But what you see, and I think you will have seen it while you were writing your first paper, that you need a legal specialist. In most countries, it can be called notary or public notary. It's a bit different because a public notary is someone from common law countries, in fact, only checking the identity of the parties. But it's also a very important role to check if the people who are coming to the office and signing a deed of transfer or establishing a mortgage because someone wants to have a loan from a bank. Yeah, of course, then you want to know if the persons who arrive and sign the deed are the same persons as they say they are. And so it's very important that someone is telling, I'm the owner of a piece of land, that you should check if that person is really the owner. And that's something that's not really done by the government, but there are people who are doing that, and it's the notary. So the person that we saw in Egypt, writers have a certain power to declare something in writing, and that has a certain status. It's a bit fake, but the identity of parties. That's one part. The other part is also to advise the persons involved in a real estate transaction. When you were speaking about advisors, what are you thinking about first? There's no wrong answer. Advisor in real estate transaction, you want to sell your house. Yeah, a bank is also kind of advisor, but then only problem of a bank that's advising is always that they will advise in their own from their own in their own profit, but they're advising and also providing money. Want to buy? Is indeed also an actor, another actor. You think about sale. Yeah, makelaar, real estate agent. Yes. But it's mainly about sale, bring together parties. But what you see is, that's a pity, but later on when you're going to buy your own house, and I hope that won't take 10 or 20 years, because now we're going to invest a lot in building new houses. But what you will see is that also a real estate agent is also doing this. But then in the phase of the sale, they're also asking the deed. They also have a connection with the cadastre. They check the information they get from buyer and seller. So it's a bit double with that notary. But I will explain when we're going to look at the Dutch system. And from an international perspective, that's more you see in the common law countries where that notary is only checking identity. They have a conveyancer, and there's also someone who is an advisor, but can also have another role. It depends on the system. So those are examples of private actors. Of course, the bank has a certain role with the money, and we will see what influence that has on the Dutch system. This is standard transaction, and I have to emphasize it's just an example. So in other countries you will find other actors or another procedure. When we're talking about the blockchain, we'll have a small look at the Swedish system. It's a bit different, but on the other hand, it also looks a bit the same. It's also can make it a bit confusing. So that's also the perspective of Jaap Zevenberg. When you read his thesis, and it's part of your exam material, he puts a lot of emphasis on how it really works. That's also what you always have to do when you're in practice and working in this field. When we look at the standard transaction, so it's a very basic one. No subdivision of parcel, nothing like that. Then we have a seller A and we have a buyer B, and they may have the help of a real estate agent. It's not compulsory in the Netherlands. It's just an advisor. And it's up to you if you want to sell your house yourself or want to buy your house. Also keep in mind that the real estate agent, they're always very friendly, but of course they are paid by someone, so not acting on the interest of the buyer. This real estate agent from the seller. Okay, so people come together and there's a contract of sale. There's an agreement. And an agreement means that A will deliver, transfer the property, the ownership to buyer B, but also, of course, the other side of the coin, and the buyer B has to pay seller A. I've said before that the real estate agent will act on behalf of the person who pays him, but it's going to help him, it's going to provide him the information, but also in fact preparing the next phase. That's the phase where the notary comes in, and that's leading up to the transfer itself. So first we have only a contract to sell, but now we need to get that ownership from A to B. Now there's also where the land administration, the registrar will come in. But first we have a look at the notary. Now he has two roles. First of all, he's a legal expert, more than the real estate agents. The real estate agents always boast that they know a lot. Now they know indeed to have education. They act also as an advisor, but notary will there's a real estate expert, and when it is more difficult transaction, there you see really where he comes in. So if there's something we changed, the subdivision of parcel, then really you need a notary for advice how we're going to do that. But next is also access and public servant. That's a bit double role in the Netherlands. So on one hand, it's also the legacy, I think, from Napoleon. On the one hand, he's acting on behalf of A and B, and on the other one, he's also taking account the needs of the system of land administration. So, to say that he's working for the government is also not right, but he has a certain role given by him to by the government. And now you see the importance. He's also going to check the identity of the seller and buyer. So we know it is correct. There's no someone pretending to be the owner. And that we also know that the buyer, who he is or she is, that identity will be correct. Then, second thing is that he's going to check if everything is okay according to what people, the A and B want. And is A really the owner? Okay. But are there other rights involved? Is there, for instance, and that's very common, is there a mortgage? So the mortgage payment should be paid off, otherwise the mortgage is still on real estate after transfer to B. So the mortgage must be removed, and the removal of the mortgage means that the bank should be paid. We start with the cadastre, and that's entrance to the public register. And in theory, because we have a registration of deeds, you could say that you should check all the deeds before how is A became the owner, but there is also a person before that A, and let's say that's X. How did X become the owner, and how did etc. etc. In practice, and it has something to do that we have a very reliable system of land administration in the Netherlands. In practice, you only check the deed, the last deed, our title deed, to transfer to A. How did A become the owner? That's the question he has to solve. And it's also in the deed that he has to draft for the transfer from A to B, that should be mentioned. So you can always check what is the way that the seller became the owner. If you want, but it's something you only do when there is something fishy and there is suspicion that there was made a mistake, you can go back. But normally, you trust the work of the notary before him, etc., etc. So kind of chain. The deed is made based on information from the cadastre and confirmed by the check in the public register. Maybe it's also check of other registers, like if there's a marriage, someone has can the legal system, or you can have a contract. Check that, ask about spouse of A. That's also interesting that real estate or not, etc., etc. If the deed is finished, there will be signed. The deed will be signed by A, B, and the notary. The notary will be the last person who also puts on the date and the time. The time is important if at the moment there is a conflict with other interests. He sends it to the registrar, and then it's interesting to see that the Dutch cadastre, our land administration, made a lot of progress because we did not only change from paper to a PDF format, so electronically. The paper is still possible, but that's hardly done. So most of the deeds is an electronic copy of the original deeds we will sign. And what is very interesting is the next step that this In most of the cases, the registrar receives the deed in his email box and will only check the formalities. So he's not going to check if A is really the owner. If they find out that in the cadastre someone else is mentioned, then the registrar will inform the notary and ask, can you explain this? But the deed will still be registered. And it is a registration of deed. So the registrar, he has to accept it. The formalities is right, and it's signed by A, it's signed by B, it's signed by the notary. All the other formalities, the parcel number is there, address is there. We know what it is. The rights involved are mentioned. Then we should register it, and then this is done in most of the cases totally automatic. Computer does the work. So there is still a registrar who is responsible. And of course, people working for him. But in most cases, it is a computer who will check this. And that's possible because the cadastre made, they call it a stamp sheet. And that's in fact a model. And they say, dear notary, if you follow this model, so you put the name of the seller over there, you put the name of the buyer over there, you put the parcel number over there, the right involved over there, then we only let the computer read that part. And how is it done? By an XML file that contains relevant information. It contains the information that the registrar wants to know. You can put a lot of other information in the deed, or agreements, etc., etc. But there is a kind of line, and it is also called in the deed, you can read it, end of cadastre part. So only that first part is interesting. And I think the Dutch are very sophisticated, and that we have this kind of system, and it's done automatically. Of course, sometimes we will have to check, but in most cases, this is just a computer. And now it's going to do two things. He informs the notary about the registration. So we received it, and it is now in our registration of deeds. It has a certain number, and also informs A and B about the change of the cadastral registration. It's just an extra. So you will receive a letter. And at the moment you are the real owner and you receive a letter. My property has been transferred. Then you can complain to the registrar. It's written down in the law. So it is an extra. I think it hardly happens. Few complaints each year, but not many. So our system works quite well. And after N has received that information, you will do a second check. See if everything is okay. There's a final check of the land registry. Message I got from the registrar. Is it indeed correct? Can I see it? Is there something wrong? All the rights suddenly established in between. But if everything is okay, and then the role of the notary on behalf of the bank is that all the money involved will be kept by the notary on his bank account. And if everything proves to be correct in this transaction, he will pay. He will pay the seller, and he will also pay the bank itself. Now you see that behind that government system is an important role of the private sector. There's a bank involved who provides some money, and there's a notary who checks identity. There's an extra. And what we say about the Dutch system is that, in fact, why it works quite well, because there's a close cooperation between the notary and the cadastre, between the notary and the registrar, I should say. So also a lot of trust between the two. And because the notary is in fact responsible for quality of the information in those deeds. So the quality of the information contained in the land registry and also the cadastre. So they're supporting each other. But now I have seen, and this image you know with the famous paper, part of your exam. But we know that there is quite a difference between the systems. Now, you will recognize that the title registration, so guaranteed by the government, is on the right-hand side of Australia with their torrent system as the summon, while old-fashioned registration of deeds is where we started in 1838 in the Netherlands. It didn't work so well, and there were problems. Wrong deeds, transfers that were not correct, and we slowly moved on. But keep this in mind: there is no a system. Can differ different levels of security and also trust. Do we believe this system, or do we think now, okay, that system, we don't trust the registrar, or we don't trust the notary, maybe fraud. Now I'm thinking a bit dark, but if you pay a lot of money for a house, you want to be sure that you will become the owner. And if the system doesn't work, generally not so good, then we're going to doubt. Now we move on to the US, and as you know, I gave that examples of countries with different systems next to each other. England and Wales is different from Scotland. Australia, we have a general all foreign systems, but the state is the state or province in Australia? Sorry. States, yes, there's the state, and they differ a bit. There was also research into Canada, there's per province. And I told you many times before that in the US, saying it's on the county level, municipality, they decide how the system of land administration works, what fundamentals and how does it work in practice. And now we have a very funny one, Dakota County. This is a bit of a favorite of Bastiaan and me. They have two systems. If you look in the system, this one is torrents. So, guaranteed by government. It's like Australia. But they have also these. And here you can select the parcels. And then the funny thing is, you should go to the website yourself. At the moment you deselect text parcels, then here is nothing. So the only parcel map by the government, cadastral map, is only torrents. And outside this, now of course they have another map, but there's a text map. It's only as important for the text sent to the owners. So these versus torrents, and I don't know what happened here, but you see that Windsor Plaza Apartments is very complicated. There's parking deeds and parking torrents. I have no idea how they work in practice. We have several times researched US this kind of I think.
Could it be something 3D?
Yeah, something 3D, I also suppose, because there is something
underground.
But I don't know. And it's also a very nice example that 2D, okay, the map will be correct, but there will be something over there, but we don't know what it is. I cannot see it. And it's also one of the reasons to change to 3D, and the whole idea also about combining the legal information with public sector information and the public law restrictions. Maybe there's something to do with that, and pipelines also possible, but we don't know. But in any case, what is the main message? It's confusing. even for me. Yeah, on one part torrents, one part deeds. It is so confusing that the US has one mortgage market. And so there are several mortgage banks and they operate, in fact, nationwide. The big banks work nationwide, so you can go to New York to have a funding for your apartment in San Francisco. It's not a problem. But how did it work out with all those systems? Because the system of land administration in New York will be completely different than in San Francisco. In any case, you can suppose that it's different because it's all on county level. The other thing, we have seen Dakota and they choose to implement torrents, but it's not all over the county, also not in the whole of the state. So different levels of security. Now, if something banks don't like, the financial sector is too many risks. Okay, or partly they can say, now, okay, your interest will be higher, but then you cannot really compete. When you increase your interest in another bank, he says, no, you cannot have loan for less interest. Yeah, you lose your market. How to solve this? And this is the background of title insurance. One part, problems with bad registration of deeds without any security. And if they went to that conveyancer, yeah, but you have made the deed and there was something wrong, and the seller was not the owner. Then the conveyancer said, yeah, but look at my contract I made. I don't guarantee anything. I did my best. That's the only thing I could do. But I could also not know that A was not the owner. And indeed, no, there was mentioned that it was sold to A. So I trusted that. Now, so the banks had a bit of trouble. They could not get their money back. And someone left with the money, pretending that he was the owner. So then they came up with a completely different approach, not to go to the government and say, you should improve your system, or we like a system all over the US to say, no, the private sector came up with the solution. Because the risk, what do you do? Risk that your house will burn down. You take an insurance. Risk you get an accident with your car, you take an insurance. So they came up with this. Well, there are risks. We can help you with insurance. This is title insurance. But now there's a difference between a fire insurance and a title insurance. Now maybe you have read the paper, but what is the big difference? Normal insurance, and you have an insurance. I hope you have an insurance that when you knock someone down from a bicycle, that the insurance company will pay that cyclist. That is a mistake, an accident. Fire, your insurance. You have an insurance against the fire will burn your apartment.
The insurance and life insurance will beforehand research the risk,
Yeah.
or like discover and
Yeah. It's a big difference. The normal insurance is something for that may happen in future. But the title insurance is something else. And when you look more closely to it, then we had a Dutch notary who checks everything beforehand. And it's also what the title insurance is doing. They check it from beforehand. So it's a bit double. There are two aspects. But they will first check if there are problems. Like he says, yeah, okay, the loss, because it's found to be effective, also they will pay your solicitor if you have to go to court, something wrong. But of course they don't like to pay. So they are going to check if everything is okay. And there's a bit role the Dutch notary has, a bit role the conveyancer will have in our systems. Okay, if they made a mistake, they couldn't find that there was something wrong or right, but real estate couldn't be found in the public registers. They will pay, but this is most important, I think. The title report before the transaction, the title insurance will check the legal status of real estate. But the funny thing is that now let's first see how it works. Now, the funny thing is that first I have a look at this one and then we move on. What do you need as an owner? It is something that, in fact, you could see on the slide, 85% of all transactions, title insurance is needed. And then something else funny is, and we discovered that while researching Dakota County, that we knew someone who was living there. He said, even when you have a torrance title and you want money from a big bank, they still ask title insurance. That's very simple. The banks don't trust, they don't rely on the system itself of the Land Administration, they rely on the system of title insurance, because that is all the same all over the US. So they have made in this way a level of security and trust that is the same. Not because of the underlying land registries, they don't care about it. So even when, so in fact you could say, when I pay for a policy, I have title insurance. That nonsense in the torrent system, because you have there, you have guaranteed by the government. And maybe that's also something in the US. I've never went there, but I've read some books and sometimes read a newspaper and I spoke to several people, and there's a distrust of government in general. And that is different when you are in a per state, but generally they like more the private sector, and the market should provide solutions. Government is extra. It takes care of national security, but for instance also railroads, that's up to the private sector. Rail transport, that's not for the government, it's private sector. But you need two policies, and there's one for you as an owner yourself, and the other one is the loan policy that takes care of the risks of the bank. Now, there's a lot of letters, of course, small letters, but yeah, here you see if you zoom in. This is a model that's used all over the US. So, same level in all states, all counties. You have a model used by all title insurance companies. To cover the risk, any defect, so on. The fourth one is security right, or another right in congruence. And so we could say all rights, restrictions, and responsibilities, but also defects by forgery, fraud. Document is not properly created, so there's a mistake of the public notary conveyancer. There's a falsified power of attorney, all things that could go wrong. And this is also a nice one. The document not properly filed, recorded, indexed in public records, no mistake by the register. Seems to be very strange mistakes. disappearing and found years later on. The clerk had a cup of coffee and forgot the deed that was on the desk. You can think that this, you cannot believe it, it happens. But okay, so that's great. The title insurance will cover that. Also public law restrictions, but now you see, you say, okay, we protected any public law restriction, it's something we couldn't know, but the government will act, because there's something wrong on your property. Yeah, okay, if the notice describing is recorded in the public records. So the risk of unknown law restrictions where government can act on, because you, as a landowner, you didn't follow the law, and you built something that was not allowed. Okay, the policy is only paying you if it could be found in the public records, but not for unknown risks. So there's a limitation. Now, and this one is for the bank, and then you see, it's most important is that the right is not valid or cannot be enforced. I already said, they are going to check it beforehand. What they do is, and it's a bit strange from our perspective, if you have, you want as a government to have a good working system and all the information, the whole idea of the SDI is that you have it on one place and there is not several agencies collecting the same information and maintaining their own databases. No, you want that on one spot so that you have no mistakes. Collect it once, use it many times. But here, in fact, what the title insurance company is doing is double it. The whole day, they are copying the information from the land registries itself. And they maintain what they call as a title plant, their own system. But they boast that it's the same information, but far more better organized. We can find information that the registrar cannot find. So we do it better. Good example, if you look on the websites of those title insurance companies, you see a lot of the claims like that. We do it better. We solve problems. We find problems. We know everything. Here, the claims that we find fix problems in 25% of the transactions. 25% of transactions. So from that perspective, you could say, yeah, this is really needed. And look how the system that the government made didn't work. Our systems are far more better and find them and solve them. Yeah, that is the US approach, and the result is the national mortgage market all over the US. Buying from different states than the owner, real property is another state. It doesn't matter. There's a title insurance company who offers one level of security. Okay. After the break, we will have a look if this could also offer a solution for the Netherlands, for Europe.